Two of the hottest housing markets right after the onset of COVID were Sacramento, California, and Austin, Texas. Both markets have cooled considerably as mortgage rates have increased quite a bit, and of course, housing inventory has grown as well. However, one of these markets has cooled off much more than the other one, where prices are down by about 20% compared to the peak of 2022. And that city has one of the strongest buyer's markets in the country right now. Part of the reason is due to a glut of housing inventory. So I have a lot to discuss in today's video. Let's talk about the Sacramento housing market versus the Austin, Texas real estate market. I first want to cover inventory numbers because the big increase of inventory has seen in many markets, but especially in these 8 states. This is according to Resi Club. They basically pulled data from Realtor.com for the month of October this year compared to October of 2019, obviously pre-COVID. So states that have more inventory compared to then, 5 years ago now, is Florida, Tennessee, Texas, Oklahoma, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and Idaho. And also very close behind is Washington State and Oregon, as well as Alabama. Now take a look at the metros though, because there's some very big differences here. One of the biggest increases amongst the 50 biggest metros is Austin, Texas. There's approximately 40% more houses for sale this October compared to October of 2019. In fact, this October marks at least an 8-year high of inventory in Austin, Texas for the month of October. There's 10,387 houses for sale this October. Going back to 2016, only 6,945. So a glut of inventory in Austin. Let's take a look at Sacramento though. This, by the way, is the greater Sacramento area, which covers Sacramento, Roseville, and Folsom. So in Sacramento, we have an increase of inventory from last year, but we're down by 20.8% from 5 years ago compared to the 40% increase in Austin, Texas. This October, 4,382 houses for sale. That's below levels in 2019, 18, 17, as well as 2016. Let's have a look at some other markets as well. Look at Phoenix, Arizona. They have 18% more houses for sale. Again, Sacramento is down by about 21%. Tampa is up by 13%. Punta Gorda, Florida is up by a whopping 68%. New Orleans is up by 15%. But as you guys can see, much of the Northeast and the Midwest have a lack of houses for sale from 5 years ago. Milwaukee is down by 37%. Detroit down by 44%. And one of the biggest declines is actually Hartford, Connecticut. In Hartford, Connecticut, there's only 1,249 houses for sale. Back in October 2016, nearly 6,400 homes for sale. And this is the reason why we're seeing big gains in home prices in the Northeast, but declines in Austin, Texas. Another way to look at this is this right here. Austin, Texas, which I should say the greater Austin area, as well as the greater Sacramento area. So this is kind of the biggest takeaway I saw here. The year-over-year change, this is October this year compared to October 2019. Austin, Texas only increased by 19%, but Sacramento is up by a whopping 43%. These other time periods is much different though. So Austin up by 40%, Sacramento is down by 21%. Also the 4-year chart, absolutely crazy, up by a whopping 168%, but 3 years even higher than that, up by 186%, whereas in Sacramento, only up by 50%. If I add in national trends, on the 5-year chart, we're down by 21%. So Sacramento, California is in line with the national average, but of course, the delta on that compared to Austin is about 60 percentage points, absolutely crazy. Again, the 4-year chart up greatly in Austin, whereas in the United States as a whole, only up by 30%. In Sacramento, we're up by 51%. Here's yet another way to look at this according to ResiClubAnalytics.com, a fantastic website if you guys want to learn about what's going on with the housing market. A lot of articles that are written by the founder, which is Lance Lambert. Not a paid promotion, but if Lance wants to promote my videos, I'd be happy to do so, but I would promote it anyways, because I actually love their analytics. Anyways, looking at Austin, Texas, right now for October, as you guys can see, the highest October levels since keywords at least October of 2017. Additionally, going back to January of 2017, this is the fourth highest level of inventory for any single month. And inventory tends to peak around August each and every year. So it's pretty crazy that we have a glut of inventory in Austin, Texas, especially compared to pre-COVID levels. In Sacramento, it's a little bit different animal here. Nearly 4,400 houses for sale, more or less in line with what we saw at this time in 2022, but it is higher than last year. Of course, higher than the onset of COVID. We're still way behind pre-COVID in 2016 through 2019. Now let's talk about home prices, because areas that have more inventory compared to 2019 are experiencing home prices softening or decreasing, whereas areas that have a lack of houses for sale, again, especially in the Northeast, had big increases in prices. So for example, in New York, up by a whopping 7.1%. Also in Connecticut, up by 7.1%. In New Haven, and Hartford, Connecticut, it's up by 7.6%. But again, this video is only looking at Sacramento and Austin. So speaking of that, Austin, Texas is down by 4% year over year. This is September, by the way, compared to September last year, down by 4%. But compare this to the peak of 2022, they're down by a whopping 20.4%. In contrast, in the greater Sacramento area, we're up by 1.8% year over year, compared to a decrease of 4% year over year in Austin. And also we're down by 5.7% compared to the peak of 2022. Again, not as great as the 20.4% decline in the greater Austin area. What's also interesting about this as well is that other areas are experiencing bigger fluctuations. So for example, in the San Jose area, up by 7.8%, and that's a big percentage increase. But again, you're looking at average home price there, probably over $1.2 million. So a nearly 8% gain is a huge dollar amount from 1 year ago. Also in Los Angeles, up by 5.1%. San Diego is up by 4.8%. But in Texas as well, some pretty big differences there as well. San Antonio is down by 2.7%. Again, Austin is down by 4%. Dallas, Texas is down by 0.3%, whereas Houston, Texas is up by 0.4%. Real estate is local and every housing market is different. So I also want to discuss the share of price reductions in Sacramento versus Austin, Texas, according to altosresearch.com. They were purchased by Housing Wire, I think it was earlier this year. Any case, looking in Sacramento, the share price drops right now, at least for the week ended November 8th, is a percentage or a share of 41%. So about 4 of every 10 houses for sale have already reduced their asking prices. That's at 41%. That is actually a little bit higher than last year at this time at around 40%, but way behind 2022. Back then, the share price drops was at 57%. What really catches my attention here is this. Let me kind of zoom in, get rid of 90 days. So to start the year, let's just look at January 1st. So the first week of January, the share price drops in Sacramento was at 35%. Now it has barely increased up to about 41%. So a small increase compared to the start this year. Look at 2022 though. To start the year, we're at 22.19%, but then it increased to nearly 57%, a giant increase in 2022, whereas this year, a very small gain. Now zooming out over the past several years, at 41% right now, this of course is higher than 21 in 2020, as well as 2019, basically in line with 2019 in fact. Looking at Austin, Texas, much different though. Austin, Texas at 54% right now for the share price drops. So a little bit more than half of the houses for sale have reduced their asking prices. This is a little bit lower in fact compared to last year at 59%. But at 54%, this is also lower than the 63% we saw during the same time frame in 2022. Of course, we're higher than 21 in 2020, but we're much higher compared to late November of 2019. Back then, the share was at 44%. Now they're at around 54%. Now, the question, of course, is why is the housing market in Austin, Texas experiencing this big correction over the past really couple of years? Whereas in Sacramento, prices are down compared to the peak of 2022. But as you guys can see, the data supports that the housing market in Austin, Texas is more favorable to home buyers right now than Sacramento. It says here, according to Newsweek, of course, I'll provide a link below for this article, and of course, all these articles. This correction is a direct consequence of how unaffordable houses have become for many after 2 years of bidding wars and low inventory, especially since rates have suddenly surged. So looking at the market in Austin, Texas, it was very, very challenging to get an offer accepted back in, I'd probably say mid 2020 through early 2022. Buyers were writing offers, no contingencies. In other words, writing offers way over asking and willing to pay far more than the asking price because there was a bidding wars for virtually every single house, and that caused inventory to absolutely plummet. Now the market is kind of digesting the fact that home prices absolutely surged. Investors are leaving because their ROI is not as great. They were expecting to see home prices and rent growth to continue to skyrocket. And in fact, that's not happening anymore. And also we're seeing a glut of home building over the past couple of years, which of course is coupled that with a glut of existing houses for sale is causing this correction in Austin, Texas. However, experts have consistently said that the current correction in the Austin housing market is nothing like the housing market crash of the Great Recession, saying that both mortgage borrowers and lenders are in a much better position now than they were 15 years ago. According to Lance Lambert, this was about 1 year ago. He says the Austin housing market is the most interesting in America. During the 2000s, or the early 2000s housing crash, it took Austin a whopping 43 months to fall by 8.5% from peak to trough. The peak in home prices compared to the trough in home prices, it took 43 months. This time around, which again was back in 2022, Austin has fallen by 10.02% in just 9 months. Reading on this article from Newsweek, it says, an Austin-based real estate agent and housing investor, Sean Fuentes, told Fortune that the city's housing market was the object of speculation from investors between 2020 and 22, with many at that time expecting prices in the city would continue rising. Of course, we all know what happened in late 2022 when supply surged and mortgage rates surged that caused home prices to fall greatly in Austin, Texas, but also across many metros across the United States. So speaking of that, let's have a look at what's happening right now according to Zillow for the month of September. It says home values are up from 1 year ago in 43 of the 50 biggest metros. So the vast majority of US metros, or the biggest ones, are experiencing gains compared to 12 months ago. Annual gains are the highest in San Jose, California, up by 7.8%. Then we have, of course, Hartford, Connecticut, up by 7.6%. New York, Providence, Rhode Island, and Buffalo, New York, rounding out the top 5. In contrast, home values are down from a year ago in 7 major metro areas. The largest drops are New Orleans, down by 4%. Again, as I mentioned, inventory up greatly there compared to 2019. And of course, Austin, Texas, down by 4%. San Antonio is down by 2.7%. Birmingham, Alabama, down by 0.7%. And Tampa Bay, Florida, down by 0.5%. Now let's go back to our inventory tracker, look at these cities, because again, like I mentioned, in general, the areas that have more inventory compared to 5 years ago are experiencing decreases in prices or home price growth really slowing down. So take a look at Austin and New Orleans. Again, New Orleans, Louisiana is up by 15.2% in the amount of houses for sale, and Austin, Texas is up by 40.1%. San Antonio and Birmingham, Alabama. San Antonio is right here. It's up by 19.7%. Again, in Sacramento, we're down by nearly 21%. In Birmingham, Alabama, they actually have 5.6% fewer houses for sale compared to 2019. But in Birmingham, Alabama, they have 5.6% fewer houses for sale compared to 5 years ago. But this is actually not as bad as the 21% decrease on a national level. So they still have a smaller decline compared to the national average. And lastly, in Tampa, Florida, they had 13% more houses for sale. So again, it makes sense that these areas that are experiencing the biggest decreases in prices are areas in which inventory is up greatly compared to 2019 in general. Also, according to Zillow, the strongest sellers markets in which sellers have a clear advantage over home buyers, those strong sellers markets are San Jose, California, Buffalo, New York, Hartford, Connecticut, Boston, and New York. In contrast, the strongest buyers market in which buyers have an advantage over home sellers are New Orleans, Miami, Jacksonville, Florida, Austin, Texas, and Tampa, Florida. In my opinion, the reason why the Austin housing market is experiencing a sharper correction than Sacramento, California are for these reasons right here. So in Austin, Texas, of course, they saw a big increase in the amount of houses for sale, both for brand new home construction, but as well as existing houses, like I shared with you guys. The biggest increase or the biggest amount of houses for sale for the month of October since at least, keywords at least, October of 2016. Also, investors are selling as well, especially Airbnbs. So they're not getting a good ROI because rents are no longer skyrocketing. On top of that, insurance and of course taxes or property taxes rising as well. People are also selling their houses because they have to work at the office again. So there's this migration to work from the office again. If you bought a house in Austin, Texas, but your work is in San Francisco, for example, some companies are requiring employees to work back in the office, right? And of course, the local wages are not supporting the growth in home prices over the past several years. In addition to that, they're no longer seeing this giant migration of people buying houses that are moving there from out of state, for example. They are seeing a big migration overall, but not as much as 2020 through early 2022. And again, when the local housing market or local residents cannot afford to buy a house, of course, that's a big problem if you don't have this giant influx of migration into the city. And frankly, we're seeing that in Sacramento as well. But at least in Sacramento, you're only around an hour and a half to about 2 hours away from the San Francisco Bay Area. So people I know, they have either able to work from home, or maybe they have to go into the Bay Area once a week or twice a week, which is more manageable if you have a 2-hour drive compared to working out of state, for example. But that's my biggest takeaways from today's video. What's your biggest takeaway? If you guys live in Sacramento or Austin, Texas, or you're an agent there, then please leave me a comment below. Also, if you guys want to buy or sell a house in the greater Sacramento area or anywhere across the United States, then please email me at jason@meetjasonwalter.com or check out my website, which is realestateteamfinder.com. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next video.